Hi, I'm Kat Rosenfield.
And I'm Phoebe Maltz Bovy, and we are, and have been for a year now, Feminine Chaos.
Yes, happy anniversary, Phoebe.
Yeah. Happy anniversary, Kat.
So before we kick off, I'm for the last time going to plug this project because we are at the 1 week, actually less than 1 week mark before the release of Stanley's Alliance's A Trick of Light in print form. And I have my final finished copy right here. I don't know if you can see, it's really shiny and there's foil and there's my name.
Wow.
So pre-orders are a big deal for the success of this project. So if you're thinking about ordering it, now would be a great time to grab it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or get it at your local indie. I honestly don't care. But if you buy it, I'll be very grateful. And
I encourage you to do so.
Yes, please. Team support. And so, yeah, from there, we have some interesting topics to discuss. Guys, let's talk about you guys.
This is reminding me that at a summer camp I went to, there was something where the camp leader would say to the whole camp, we had some kind of like assembly, but a camp, and it would be, hey, you guys, and everybody would have to respond, hey, what? I don't remember why.
Ooh.
But it was definitely a co-ed camp. Yeah, something like that.
When I say hey, you say guys.
Yeah,
hey.
Something like that. So, Kat, are you offended if somebody says you guys and you are one of the guys?
No, and I say you guys.
As do I. I have to. It's like in the last couple months that I've practically been aware that would be potentially fraught.
Yeah. I became aware of this maybe a little bit earlier because it was a big topic of discussion in a women-only Facebook group that I'm in where people started objecting to the use of guys. But we are now talking about the use of you guys as a form of casual group address, gender neutral, because this video has recently been posted online by the Now This website, which I believe is like a progressive news organization, featuring a woman instructing anybody who happens to be watching that you guys, while it may seem innocuous, in fact, should not be normalized. I'm like doing this air quote thing because this is not me talking. This is this woman on Now This. You guys should not be normalized because it has a cognitive impact on women and non-binary folks who find it exclusionary. And I mean, to the credit of, I guess, the internet at large, I have not seen anybody agreeing with this video. But
I've seen many people disagreeing with it. I've seen the famous ratio. Well, I actually don't know what ratio it produced, but I have only seen criticism of it.
Yeah. So I think that this was probably a misstep on the part of Now This, unless this is what they were going for, which maybe it was. But it is in fact a thing in certain corners to do this kind of speech policing, and specifically to do it surrounding you guys. So and clearly it's a tactic that Now This has decided to employ for whatever reason, which is something I want to kind of dig into a little bit. Mm-hmm. But so that's why we're talking about it. It's on everyone's mind.
Absolutely. And the video, what was so strange about it was it presented saying you guys as something that someone would do to be cool, to be hip, as some sort of affectation, as versus, as Kat pointed out on Twitter, something that is just regional. And that I guess we are both from regions where we are from you guys territory. So I went to an all-girls school for some of my childhood, and we would address one another as you guys. There were no guys present. This was just how you talk to people. It wasn't. It was one of these things where, if you think about it, it's like a word like mankind. It's like it's got in its root a male default, and you can see that, and you can sort of ponder what that means about the language, and hope that the language evolves. But if you want to, but it was certainly not in daily life. Nobody thought this referred to guys specifically.
Right. I mean, it's not even that you have to ponder like whether the language has evolved. It has evolved. The regional dialect survey that I tapped into to find out exactly how prevalent this was actually identified that 35% of the country uses you guys as its preferred form of, casually and directly addressing a mixed group or just a group of people, regardless of gender. It could be all women, it could be all men, it could be both. And it's popular. So it's by far the most popular. The next one down is y'all, which for obvious reasons is prevalent in the Southeast, but in the Northeast, the Midwest, the Pacific Northwest, and down the California coast, you guys is the way we talk to you guys.
Exactly. And y'all seems, I know someone I know from Twitter definitely wrote an article about this at one point, but the use of y'all has a kind of strangely like progressive, but not necessarily progressive, possibly culturally appropriative connotation these days. Yeah. There's this kind of like, to use y'all rather than you guys, it's like it strikes a very specific note coming from somebody who does not naturally, like when I see people on Facebook who I went to high school with in New York City using y'all, I just like it's like very specific. It's like a specific tone.
Yeah. I find it a little cringe. I mean, because you're obviously here, you can hear the lack of, other kind of regional accommodations there. Like, I mean, I don't like to say y'all. I think it just sounds really weird.
I can't imagine. I can only imagine saying it as some kind of like to make some sort of point. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something I would say. It doesn't, y'all.
It doesn't flow off the tongue. And I think it does sound a little cringeworthy coming from somebody who does not otherwise talk like a Southerner. There's just something,
right. The English language lacks, vous. Like, there's no plural you. And there are occasions when you want to be clear that you're talking to more than one person. And as I believe it was Arya who pointed out on Twitter, you people
has totally other connotations.
Would not be helpful even if people is neutral and you is neutral.
Yeah. And I mean, so the thing that interests me about, this approach overall of deciding, to come out with a video about why, and it's so covert aggressive too. She's like, here's why you might want to consider using a different form of dress.
If you and your friends want to keep doing this, that's okay. I'm not going to come to your house and stop you, but
yeah, I'm just saying it makes you a bad person. Or I'm not saying it makes you a bad person, but like you can infer that it makes you a bad person. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's such an unpopular form of language. Language policing is never popular, but this particular thing, it is like the most petty, intolerant thing to do, to decide kind of, unilaterally, like, I don't like the way you people talk. And so I want you to talk different. And here's a 5-minute, really condescending video about why the way you talk is not okay. Instead of just learning to tolerate, the fact that people sometimes use phrases that you don't like, or, maybe you don't like the sound of their accent. It's such a normal adult thing to do that for some reason in this particular case, the left, or at least this part of the left, is embracing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to me like the kind of thing where I have trouble believing people are actually offended. And I think it seems as though it could on paper offend. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that people are actually hearing you guys and being upset about it. It seems more like the sort of thing someone could imagine that somebody might be upset. Like it seemed all out of proportion. Like the amount of hassle it is to change a term versus, it seems like, so this is my theory about this, which gets us to another of these terms as well, that there's this thing where if a term has been in use for a while, it's like inherently problematic and must be changed because it evokes the horrible then when everything was bad as versus now when everything is either really, really bad or somehow also simultaneously fantastic. I don't know.
Now when we know better and can do better.
So exactly. So it's both that everything is terrible, but also somehow everything except for 5 minutes ago up to today was really terrible. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But where I see this really playing out though, and I can't set this thought aside for another moment. folks, spelled Folx. Now, the word folks spelled the usual way, Folks. I would have not want any spelling bees, but the point is, it's a gender neutral term already. It is.
Yes, it is.
It is completely gender neutral. Why change its spelling without even changing its pronunciation? What is different when you put an X in folks? And I've thought about this.
Cool. I don't know. It looks.
I've thought about this too much. And what I think, my theory is that it's basically about making anybody who is unfamiliar with that feel out of it and possibly somehow problematic and bigoted, but they're not even sure against whom or why or what. But it's just about making anybody who's a bit older and a little less online feeling like they've done something wrong. And I think what it does is it takes the kind of model of certain terms specifically to do, mainly, not exclusively, but specifically to do with race, where the outdated term that was never exactly a slur will come to seem really dated in a fraught way. And there's a reason, to not use it, because if you use it, it seems like you're trying to, embrace some sort of pre-civil rights era visions of race. It seems like it's taking that framework and applying it to the entirety of language and saying that if any term was popular in the 1990s and whatever, well, that was then, we better banish it along with Friends and all those sitcoms. And
Right. Everything that was popular then is problematic now. What's interesting too is, to return to the video about guys, is the video itself goes through the kind of rich history and etymology of guys as it first developed, I guess, surrounding Guy Fawkes, the famous British fellow who tried to blow up Parliament. Or did he actually succeed in blowing up Parliament? I can never remember if he managed to do it or not.
I'm not sure.
But, and then it was initially meant to
People
describe...
have comments, though, explaining this in detail.
Right. So it described, him or someone like him, and then it started to evolve just, to describe creepy people, and then to describe men, and then evolved to be this gender-neutral form of address. The video talks about the evolution of this term, so already acknowledges that something can go from one place to another and evolve from something very specific to something very general and innocuous. Except that it stops short of suggesting that it's possible for the term to evolve past. It's like it's going to evolve, and then it's going to just stop. It's going to stop here in this problematic place, and you should stop using it, rather than just allowing that it's in fact already past that.
I could see the most generous read I have on it is I can see how. Clearly it is still a gendered term in some contexts. Like if I say, oh, look, there's a really hot guy, we're not sitting here pondering the gender of that hot person.
Of course.
So I can understand why, like, on paper, guys seems like one of these things, like mankind, like brotherhood. I don't know, different sort of terms that could be used clearly to mean everybody, but I guess I could kind of see, like, it almost like in French would be more of a thing where, like, to only use, where the more sort of progressive thing would be to use the masculine and the feminine. But it's like too far-fetched. I'm sorry, like, guys in the plural is gender neutral in spoken English. And the sort of hassle of having people walk on eggshells to avoid it seems not proportional with any, like, is anybody actually upset about it? Like, that's the thing.
No,
I think
it's actually this thing that this philosopher that I think we both know on Twitter, Oliver Traldi, described as rhetorical extortion, and he combined it into a portmanteau called rextortion, but I can't tolerate that. So
it's an interesting idea, though. Yeah,
it's the idea that somebody could interpret it in this absolutely ludicrously stupid way that nobody actually is, but somebody could do this. And so we should accommodate this imaginary, hypothetically offended person to demonstrate that we are in fact good, contemporary progressive people.
It's also the thing though where we've talked about this before on Feminine Chaos, but where rather than just saying, you guys could come across as a bit gendered, it has to be this sanctimonious, preachy, language policey approach. You know what I mean? Like there's no just sort of like, that could be a little it's like it has to be ban it, you know?
I mean, I think the thing is that even, when you're pointing it out, even if you, under the pretense of doing it in this friendly way, hey, you might want to think about this.
Oh, no, I don't even mean that you might want to think about it. I mean, just like thinking about, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I think the fact is that, anytime you call attention to something like this, it's going to be interpreted as a request for some kind of action. I mean, it's not like you're just bringing it up to kind of shoot the shit. I
don't know. I'm not sure. I think anytime you bring it up in a little designed to be preachy video like this video, there's certainly no sort of nuanced version of that. But I feel like if I saw somebody making like either like writing an article or whatever just about like guys, and I don't know, like I think there's probably a even passive aggressive, I don't know. It just seems like there's not an actual problem there. And that with terms like, I don't know. I mean, I guess the you guys thing ultimately bothers me less than the folks thing, because the folks thing seems like it's really about giving the impression that that you have to be kind of with it in this way that doesn't even make sense. Like folks is not replacing something that could even in some convoluted way be problematic.
Yeah. So I'm going to actually disagree with you and say that I think the you guys thing is much worse than the folks thing because it applies to spoken English.
That's a good point.
To casual spoken language. And another thing that, we've sort of been circling a little bit in this conversation, but that I want to put a pin in is the fact that we have a progressive news organization that is, supposedly aimed at disseminating information, ideally, I guess, persuading people, towards the left in the year leading up to the 2020 election, that they've chosen to make a video like this, that employs this deeply unpopular tactic, of identifying something that is in fact innocuous, that everyone agrees is not a problem, and saying, actually, this is a problem and you need to change. It's alienating to people, even if they don't end up running into the arms of the Trump administration. I really question the choice to take this approach. Like, what is the point? What are you accomplishing, by doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much of a piece with the sort of, and I won't take this tangent as far as goodness knows I could, but the thing of like declaring old TV shows or whatever, like we never really thought about it, but look how problematic this thing from the past is, where it's like, it just makes people feel bad and doesn't actually like necessarily add anything, and it's not really addressing actual major problems. It's just kind of saying, if you were around before, 5 years ago, you should feel bad, which is not helpful for getting people onto the left. It's not helpful for just being generally reasonable.
Right. In the meantime, if we're going to be talking about, innocuous terms of phrase that make people uncomfortable, I just want to put in right now that tickle my fancy and also get a wiggle on should be banned.
I've never heard the second of those, but tickle my fancy thing. Tickle my fancy is
right. Like if you use that phrase, you should be in jail. But hey, you guys is okay.
Yeah. Well, us guys are fine with it. So
right.
And if we're feminine chaos and we're guys, then yeah. So there's some other guys we have to talk about soon, though. Are you ready to talk about the other guys?
I am. I also just want to register that I was kidding about the tickle my fancy thing. You don't actually need to go to jail if you say it. It's just really weird and gross.
Just a really, really fancy jail.
Where
lace handcuffs.
Tickle you. Oh, yes. God, I'm punchy this morning. Okay, so let's move on to...
Oh, boy. Okay, so here's the big one. The y'all get ready for this. if you are at all on social media, if you probably are living under a rock, it doesn't matter. You probably are aware of the big story in New York Magazine about, oh my goodness, I don't have it open, so I don't remember what the headline is, but it's Natalie Beach wrote an article about being Caroline Calloway's, what exactly? Well, ghostwriter, best friend, maid, personal assistant, all sorts of ex-friend now. It's basically this long personal essay about a lot of, and this is admittedly one of my, it kind of like combines a few of my like pet interests, but like lifestyle, basically like lifestyle blog drama, except it's about Instagram rather than a blog. It's very, because it's very of the moment.
Yeah.
Where it's about the falling out. Now this is going to sound, it's like really hard to describe why this would be compelling.
I want to take a shot at it before you summarize it.
Please
As Phoebe's describing this, you need to imagine like Sex in the City meets single white female for the Instagram generation with a reality TV kind of twist, because it all actually happened in real life.
And with also a certain, I'm going to add some more cultural references from, well, yeah, I guess even longer ago. So with a certain like friendship dynamic or dynamic between women that you see in a few different places. So it's kind of like the Mary and Rhoda dynamic where there's the like golden girl and then the like, you know, frumpy sidekick in the shadows, or like Daria. It had a certain Daria vibe where the author is Daria.
Yeah.
And
I'll throw in for Heavenly Creatures
Quinn,
too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd seen Black Swan, online, somebody had put that as one of the references, but like this dynamic where there's the kind of, on the one side, the author of this piece is a sort of like, she's the sort of intellectual brunette who, you know, she's in the picture accompanying the piece wearing all black with the black sunglasses, sort of like hidden. And then there's her like blonde, rich, pearl wearing socialite sort of friend who's like the one in the spotlight, and the one who's been in the shadows is kind of wants the spotlight for herself and kind of gets it because she writes this big article.
Right. So I guess maybe just like to try to summarize this piece, it really traces back their whole history together. Yes. They met in college in a fiction writing or nonfiction, creative nonfiction workshop.
Writing, yeah.
And became kind of Insta friends in this very intense way that I think if you're a woman, you'll recognize.
I recognized it.
Yeah. I'm not sure honestly that this is as familiar friendship dynamic to men. But they became very close, started traveling together, and really evolved into this kind of codependent relationship where Caroline Calloway was trying to become an Instagram star. She's also an addict and really flighty and flaky and, you know, sort of skates by, it seems, on charm. And then she's got Natalie ghostwriting her Instagram captions, helping her to become famous, ultimately helping her land a book deal that Natalie's also going to help co-write, or ghostwrite rather, for a share of the profits. But then things all began to fall apart. Apparently Caroline Calloway, which I missed this because I am not online enough or not on Instagram enough, became known for being kind of a scammer and a grifter and trying to
I had never heard of this person before. So
yeah. So there was like a meltdown. She tried to set up a kind of a one-woman version of the Fire Festival where she was offering life coaching sessions, and then she didn't deliver. And people ended up eating salad on the floor for $165 a pop. And so it was like this big meltdown, and people were starting to pay attention to this because the meltdown was getting attention in the press. So this behind the scenes look at it from the perspective of Natalie, who was very close to the situation, but who's now positioning herself as kind of an antagonist to Caroline, was received on the internet like, somebody compared it to an album drop. Like it was this huge,
that was amazing. I thought.
Everyone was waiting to get like the dirt on this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes it so compelling is that it just hits a lot of different things. So like when I was rereading the New York Magazine piece about it. I thought about how Natalie is kind of like in the role of the Instagram boyfriend in it, like where she's taking all these pictures and kind of like in the background, but like building the brand of somebody, which is like a role that's very familiar to the point of cliche when it's a man doing this for his female partner. But like for a platonic female friend, it's like there's something that is part of it. I think that like if they were lovers, then it would be a little different. But the fact that they're platonic friends, both ostensibly straight, as far as the article conveys, it led to certain resentment. So it's like beyond being a ghostwriter, like I think, and also the whole question of ghostwriting Instagram captions. And there's a really interesting part in the story about about where the authors would try to explain in like on her resume what this was.
Yeah.
And trying to convey to like conventional, like traditional employers what that is. Cause it's already baseline. Like I've done something similar to this for blog posts before, but that's like somehow a lot easier to convey even than Instagram, especially because it wasn't really a business. It was like for an influencer. What does that even mean?
Right. And where there's this personal friendship at the center of it. I've thought a lot about a couple of things. One is how this story would have played if Caroline had been a man, and Natalie was like her muse doing all the work behind the scenes in that way that we sometimes hear about like Nabokov's wife doing for him, licking his stamps.
There's a novel that's about exactly this that I can't say which one because I would give it away. Give away the plot, but yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
But I think maybe that would actually probably erase some of the ambiguity that currently exists in this story. I think we would have an easier time deciding that the man was a villain, who took advantage, and, kind of wrecked the life of this woman, for his own self-aggrandizement. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that's interesting is how men play this role, like not literally. There are actually no real male characters in the story particularly, or at least nobody of import. But Natalie's relationships with men as compared with Caroline's become a really central part of this story. And
yes.
It's fascinating how, Caroline is like the golden girl, and she's very charming, and she gets boyfriends very easily, and men pay attention to her and want to do things for her. And Natalie is not like that. And there's this part, and it's reiterated a couple of times, where she says to Caroline, men treat me differently than they treat you.
Yes.
And it's almost played like this is Caroline's fault.
Well, yes. Oh my goodness. So I've copied and pasted this exact quote. So Caroline told me that in order to attract men, I had to allow myself to be chased like she did with her boyfriend. Well, men treat you very differently than they treat me, I told her. Look at you, look at me. I was in scuffed Timberlands and leggings under my jeans, while Caroline wore a lacy baby doll dress with knee-high suede boots. Being the foil to a hot girl was taking its toll, and writing someone else's love story was even harder. And that dynamic is introduced even earlier with the whole thing about how they met. She turned in personal essays to that class they were in together about heartbreak in boarding school, had silk eyelashes, and wore cashmere sweaters without a bra. She seemed like an adult. I, meanwhile, was a virgin with a meek ponytail living in a railroad apartment that was sinking into the Gowanus Canal. And now probably fully half of her viewers think that I personally was a virgin sinking into the Gowanus Canal, and not that I'm quoting from it. This is a quote.
Yeah. This was Natalie. This was not Phoebe.
No, I'm not in the Gowanus Canal. But anyway, it's this dynamic that really, like, the thing that jumped out at me when I read it was it's completely the Taylor Swift thing. It's the Taylor Swift thing that I always say it wrong.
She wears short skirts, I wear t-shirts.
Yes.
That one, yeah.
Which is also the other girls meme where, like, other girls look hot. I am just this little nerd and whatever. It's that. And it's an annoying meme because it's like everybody's complicated, including the other girl, including the girl in the short skirts. And it's also a bit annoying because it's like, if you're so envious of the girl who wears the short skirts, you too can go to Forever 21 or H&M or whatever, or just cut your existing skirts too short, you know? Like, I don't know. It just seems like a little bit, it's not insurmountable.
A short skirt costs $5. You could get one if you really wanted one.
It's not an unattainable garment.
Yeah. I mean, but this is actually kind of is a good place, I think, to talk about what I sort of have been ruminating on in the wake of this story, which is about how much kind of mutual using was going on. You look at this story of Caroline, it's easy to say, oh man, she really used Natalie to craft a narrative, you know, to create this persona at Natalie's expense. But the entire time when you see things like, you know, Natalie casting herself in the role of the other girl or the ugly duckling, and maybe she wasn't doing it consciously at the time, but ultimately she used Caroline to further her brand, you know,
she sort of admits this though, but it's between the lines, but she does admit it, because at one point kind of early on, she sort of describes, it's first of all very clear that as wrapped up as as intense a friendship as it was, she's always very clear that she had her other, like almost sort of like the real friends who she was also hanging out with, and that she was telling them something. I think this was something she was telling her friends. She was someone, this is Natalie speaking about Caroline, she was someone to write about, and that was what I wanted most of all. She says that early on. So it's like, was she ever really a friend? Like it was always a little bit touch and go on that front. And then she admits that when Caroline's star kind of rises as an Instagram personality, it's Natalie who gets back in touch.
Right.
And is like, let me work for you again or whatever. You know, so it's clearly there's this sort of hungry young writer opportunism in that direction. And that's not, I think it's interesting how that's not really hidden, even though I feel like it hasn't been entirely, I'm not sure if the reception of the article, it's like, it's easier to just read it as another one of these, because it's all kind of implicitly in reference to these other stories, especially that Anna Delvey, like where there's a rich...
Right, the Instagram. Yeah. And she's in jail now, I think, so...
Possibly. She definitely got in trouble with the law from this. But where I think this seems to fit into that mold of like, oh, there was this rich, you know, golden girl grifter who, you know, screwed over some meek writer woman who's just trying to make her way in New York. And it's like, but there's more. This story is a little more complicated. And Kat, you were pointing out something that I found very interesting about the sort of socioeconomic, what is and isn't stated, because I found this pretty compelling.
Yeah, you know, she spends a lot of time, Natalie spends a lot of time making note of these various blue-collar jobs that she had, you know, like loading boxes or working in a lettuce farm on the rooftop of Whole Foods, that sort of serves to position her as the working class foil to the mega rich golden girl, in a way that I think may be a little bit misleading. I mean, obviously it kind of create, you know, it is an extra layer of mythology, but also one that helps to cast her as the underdog in this story, in a way that feels so pushy that I found myself kind of questioning it, and I mean, little less sympathetic than I should have been.
There's details that suggest that these are more just sort of like recent college grad experiences than a tremendous difference in class, both sort of in two directions. I mean, there's one that like first of all, they met at NYU as undergrads, which is not generally, I mean, that could go all sorts of ways, but that doesn't imply that she's struggling necessarily. And she mentions that they're both on their parents' phone plans. Mm-hmm. So it's not like either of them were truly like out on their own fully, if that makes sense. Like, this is not a working class struggle story particularly, but also I wonder in the other direction in terms of this Caroline, how rich she was. I mean, it sounds like she was just kind of spending the way people do when they have problems and are overspending, like buying, like so the story, I should say, is just very, very well crafted. Like this article is just very, very well written. And it has these details that are just really, really like well conveyed. So this is Natalie describing Caroline. She had ripped up the wall-to-wall carpet in her Cambridge, I believe, Cambridge, UK, her dorm room, I think. She'd ripped up the wall-to-wall carpet and shoved the squares into her closet because she had always wanted exposed wood floors. But you couldn't even step out of bed without getting splinters. And then also in the same scene, she was still hunched over eBay in her fur coat, having purchased $6,000 worth of furniture. And also something about impulse buying King Charles spaniels. And it's like reading about some sort of like late 19th century, like French decadent. Like it reminded me of like Against the Grain by like Huysmans. It seems sort of like, I can't ever pronounce his name correctly, but whatever. It seemed like something like really, really decadent in that sense. But does it mean that her parents gave her $6,000, or does it mean that she just took a credit card and because she was really, really high, or just
right?
Really,
I mean, she has all. We should mention this, like, you know, the number of substance abuse problems and clear like mental health issues. You know, this is a woman who stays up all night on Adderall and is not showering and is not eating and has been wearing the same ratty gown for 2 days.
Yeah.
Like her friend is insisting that she bathe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is clearly not a well person.
Right.
And so when you were talking about, you know, like 19th century decadence, what I'm thinking of is Grey Gardens.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that too. Yeah. I mean, I think, well, and then this gets to this other question, which is sort of I don't know how to actually address this because there's kind of two different questions. One is just sort of the ethics of the whole thing, of this personal essay, which has itself already, even though this just appeared with the subject of at least one additional essay by somebody else, like, is it okay to go online separate from any legal issues, which I've also seen speculation that there could be those, but is it nice to go and be like, my ex-friend is this rich, you know, brat, when indeed the ex-friend may be rich, maybe bratty, is also clearly having some sort of problems, and it just seems a little cruel, maybe, which kind of gets to the other issue, which is, like all personal essays, I don't want to say all, but like most personal essays, there's this kind of, the thesis underlying it is that the author is the better person, is a good person, and it reads like this kind of triumph story for Natalie, where not only is there the meta story of that she's got this big article in New York Magazine, but there's also this part at the end where I don't remember if I no, I don't think I found this, but where she where she meets no, I see what it is. Here it is. Where she says, in Cambridge, I didn't see someone I wanted to be, but a girl living with one fork, no friends, and multiple copies of Prozac Nation. Now I saw Caroline for what she was, a person in need of help that I didn't know how to give. And also that she says that the last time she saw Caroline, she was introducing her to them. She writes, I was introducing her to the man I'd one day marry. So it's like, the gist of it is Natalie has her life together, but poor Caroline, oh, my poor pitiful ex-friend. And it's sort of like, with the story is kind of like, Caroline, given everything, has fallen. I, given nothing, have done great. And I feel like that's maybe
was inside me all along.
And I almost feel like that's what makes, like, I was trying to figure out, why do somebody who objectively has more in common with Natalie feel like, about this story? And I think it's like, I think it's the sort of like, the sort of, aha, I win kind of aspect that feels a little either cruel or protest too much. I don't know which it is. I
mean, I think that what you ultimately get here is two women, each utterly devoted to their brand and to the character they've created, which may or may not actually be the real woman. I mean, I think, and these two women are characters who would not exist without each other.
Sure.
You know, I mean, it's the kind of parasitic, symbiotic thing going on between them that I think makes this story so interesting. But I really wonder what the truth is still, coming to the end of this.
Well, there's already been a whole lot of a mix of Caroline apparently on Instagram sort of questioning bits of this, like about who did what aspect of ghostwriting, and also this appeared on Twitter, and I don't know why, but apparently the owner of New York City's only pencil shop denies that Natalie had a job there, and she says she worked in a pencil shop. So then the question is, where was this pencil shop or something? I mean, I don't know, I guess, but the ethics of it, like this sort of, there is this question that also has come up in the sort of Twitter Talmudic conversation about this essay, which is like, is this Caroline a public figure of the sort who like deserves this real sort of takedown? Because that's what this feels like. It feels kind of like she's this like sort of like she's somebody who needs to be brought down a peg. And is this, and I don't know. It's like, that's like if it's one woman writing about a friendship, that's something else. But like, I don't know. Cause like I've often wondered just about like, I felt guilty following, not even like participating in any way in or writing, but following drama on lifestyle blogs where like on one lifestyle blog, I read one of the employees kind of disappeared. One of the like assistants who also had a presence on the site sort of disappeared in this huff. And there was a lot of sort of gossip about it online. And I was like reading the gossip, looking at their Instagram page, because this stuff can be really fascinating.
Yeah. I
wonder why there was a falling out and all of this. But I would always feel sort of like dirty looking at this, I mean,
I think although I totally understand the appeal of that, these sort of like train wreck dramas that you can't look away from. I'm starting to think that the Natalie and Caroline story is maybe something more than that, or deeper.
And what
than
is
that.
Drama if not train wrecks? I mean, that's the thing.
Right. But I mean, when I think my ultimate takeaway on this is that, it's a millennial story about two women destroying each other for the sake of their art, which is also their brand, which is also who they are. So maybe we've actually seen what it looks like when a 20-something woman becomes an art monster.
Oh, so which one is the art monster though?
I think they both are. Working in different mediums. But yeah, like, maybe one is the Marina Abramovich and the other is that guy she dated performatively and then they broke up on the Great Wall of China. I wish I could remember his name.
It could be. I mean, that, and then the whole thing's a distraction. The whole, like, one of them being the pretty one, the other being the smart one is like all a distraction. And it's almost like a sexist interpretation, even though that's the interpretation that they're kind of giving to the world. It's the art and not because you've got to figure the one who's not the pretty one, clearly she's got this husband at the end and she's necessarily, I don't know, but I do think though that I think it can be all of these things. I think it can be all of these things because, I mean, I felt like I got very sucked into the story because I could relate to so many angles of it. And I think it's not just me, clearly, because it was like my whole Twitter timeline clearly was feeling because like the professional aspects of it, the sort of being a young writer wanting to make sure that like your byline is seen. I related to that. I related to that sort of intense friendship dynamic. What I didn't relate to was the urge to kind of put a huge essay out there, claiming that I was the better person in one of these friendships. That was the part that I couldn't quite make the leap. But the story itself, yeah, I think it has a lot of kind of universal professional and personal themes, even beyond the arts. Although I think I buy this art monster thing. I think that's right.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that it's so relatable in so many different ways, maybe that just makes it better art. Possibly, I don't know. Or
should it not have existed to begin with? Is it unethical? Should we not have had access to this?
I don't know. I mean, now we're kind of traveling into a big gray area about, what are the parameters when it comes to writing about your life, which invariably bumps up against the lives of other people. And, where do your rights to tell your story end, where their story begins? You can't kind of unweave these things, these narratives from each other. So I think
feel like given that she has a platform too, given that this Caroline has a platform as well, apparently a very huge platform, I'm finding it hard to really land on, and this is the most unethical thing. People tell very, very personal stories about their family members, including their children. That is something else. This seems like, well, Caroline will probably, I'm sure we'll hear from Caroline.
Yeah. I mean, I am sort of, I almost wish that I could time travel 30 years into the future to see if this becomes an art feud, that plays out in public in different mediums, maybe across multiple platforms that haven't even been invented yet over the next 25 years.
That would be something. I mean, there's already a BuzzFeed quiz. This struck me as amazing. There's already a BuzzFeed quiz. Are you a Caroline or a Natalie?
Yes.
I mean, they're like these archetypes.
The Are you a Carrie or a Samantha? Are you a Caroline or a Natalie?
Goodness.
I think it's incredible.
Yeah. So it's probably not the last we're going to be hearing about these people. And they're sort of, I don't know, they're classical drama that's playing out.
To be continued with Caroline and Natalie. Maybe we'll even talk about them again.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe a dramatic reading where we have to act out the roles and you took me to Sicily but you did this, and I don't know.
I'm picturing that scene now in Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion where they're arguing about who's the Mary and who's the Rhoda. Perfect.
Yes, I'm not only familiar with the Mary and Rhoda, but also with that. So yes, for sure.
It all kind of comes back to, some of this is new and some of it is very, very old.
Absolutely.
So I think we may have come to the end.
I think so.
Of our 1-year anniversary of Feminine Chaos.
Absolutely.
And it's been fun. See you next time.
See you next time.